Okay, so forget the pink slips for a minute. Forget all the headlines about, mass layoffs from automation. Imagine this instead. The next massive, world-changing tech platform, the one that might eventually replace your entire industry, imagine it's not owned by Silicon Valley
Right.
stockholders.
Or massive hedge funds.
Exactly.
Hmm.
Instead, it's owned by you and your colleagues, the people who are actually using it, actually building the value on it.
And that core idea right there, that's what defines what we're calling a platform cooperative. We're basically taking the historical co-op model, which has worked for everything from
Right.
farming to banking, and we're plugging it directly into the sharing economy.
And the mission here, it's not just about building like a better app. It's a direct response to this fundamental economic crisis that's being driven by technology.
Hmm.
I mean, right now, automation and AI, they're not just replacing jobs faster than new work is being created. They're automating wealth itself.
This is the absolute crux of the issue. As AI gets more and more sophisticated, we're facing a very real threat of, well, technological unemployment. What happens to your income stability when wages, salaries, benefits, how most people make a living, what happens when that starts to shrink?
And the central problem is that this kind of tech progress just makes inequality worse. When employment income shrinks, corporate profits, and the investment income for shareholders, that just surges at the same time. We are seeing this structural funneling of all the productivity gains away from workers and straight into the hands of people who already have capital.
Which is why broadening ownership is presented as the critical strategic countermeasure. If you can't rely on a job for your income anymore, you have to find a way to rely on ownership. And extending the co-op structure into the digital world gives you a viable framework to mitigate that income decline.
And, while this all feels incredibly urgent and modern, it really does have a solid intellectual foundation. The sources we're looking at, they trace this idea, platform cooperativism, back to thinkers like Trip Schultz, who actually coined the term. We're talking about a movement that really started to solidify its framework back in 2017 with that book of essays, Ours to Hack and to Own.
Yeah, and that just proves this isn't some abstract theory cooked up in a lab somewhere. It's a concrete, well-researched framework that's been developed over years as a direct structural response to the technological upheaval we're all living through right now.
Okay, so let's unpack this with some real examples. For you, the listener, this is where that abstract concept really snaps into focus. When we talk about platform co-ops, what does that actually look like in practice today? What's already up and running?
Well, we have several excellent working models that are already challenging the big players in, say, logistics and services. A really prominent one is the Green Taxi Cooperative in Denver. It functions as a direct, member-owned competitor to Uber and Lyft.
So the drivers actually own the platform.
The drivers own the platform, they control the policies, they retain the profits.
A direct challenge to the rideshare behemoths, owned by the people doing the work. What about other services, maybe less focused on trans?
Exactly. And that's a great question because we also see platforms like Loconomics. It's a cooperative app that connects service professionals, home cleaners, pet sitters, handymen with customers. The people providing the services are the member owners.
Ah, so that eliminates the whole incentive for the platform to just keep cutting their pay or jacking up fees.
Right, which always happens when outside investors start demanding higher and higher returns.
That makes perfect sense. And my favorite example from the sources was in the creative industry. Stocksy, this online stock photo and video service.
Yes, Stocksy is a crucial example. The photographers and videographers who contribute their work, they are the owners.
Which totally realigns the incentives.
It completely realigns them. Instead of some tech company trying to maximize shareholder value by, paying artists as little as possible, the owners, the creators themselves, they benefit directly from the platform's success. It makes them want to contribute their best work.
And that is a perfect pivot, actually, to the huge difference in financial philosophy here. The co-op model versus the extractive corporate model. I think the classic example here has to be REI, the outdoor retail giant.
Absolutely. REI is a prime example of a successful consumer cooperative. Its customers are its owners. A traditional corporation is basically designed to find ways to pull cash out and send it to external stockholders. But REI is built for reinvestment and loyalty.
Right. When you shop at REI and you're an owner, the dividend you get back isn't cash that ends up in some silent shareholder's account halfway across the world. It's store credit or a discount that makes you want to come back and buy more gear there.
It's a virtuous feedback loop. It fuels growth and it reinforces loyalty among the very people who rely on the store. It's reinvestment, not extraction. And that whole concept, the flow of money back into the business instead of out of it, that's often framed as the flywheel problem.
Right. You need that massive initial push of energy, that startup investment to get the tech flywheel spinning. But once it has momentum, the company's own income should, in theory, keep it going. So what does the research say about how well co-ops do with that?
The research, especially from outside the U.S., where co-ops are more common, suggests that co-ops are actually really good at that maintenance phase. They sustain themselves just as well as, or often better than, standard businesses. The challenge, though, is getting that initial energy, that startup phase.
Especially for these complex tech platforms?
Oh, absolutely. When you need massive upfront development costs just to compete with an Amazon or an Uber.
And that struggle is it's rooted in the structure of traditional capitalism, which is designed with this huge mechanism to pull resources out. We can call it the extraction mechanism, or like the sources say, the spigot.
Exactly. Investors expect huge profits quickly, and those expectations create these large spigots that just drain resources right into shareholder accounts.
And this happens through two main ways, right?
Right. Dividends paid out and stock buyback programs. And we have some pretty staggering financial data on the scale of this extraction, and it's critical for you to understand why this ownership reform is so necessary.
That drag is clearly structural. Since traditional companies are just built to extract that value, can you quantify how big this transfer of wealth actually is? Give us the hard data.
Okay, so in 2014 alone, dividends and stock buyback programs transferred over $1 trillion of wealth from corporations to their shareholders.
$1 trillion in a single year.
In just 2014, yeah. And get this, since the year 2000, this transfer has averaged 5.5% of U.S. GDP every single year.
Wait, 5.5% of the entire U.S. economic output every year for 2 decades is just being siphoned from corporate profits into shareholder pockets? That's astounding.
And it suggests the system is, let's say, structurally leaky. It gets even more focused when you look at the S&P 500, the biggest publicly traded companies. Between 1999 and 2017, dividends and stock buybacks averaged 88% of their total operating earnings.
88%. So just so I have this straight, if a company made $1 billion in profit, $880 million of it was immediately pulled out. That's money that could have gone to R&D, innovation, higher wages, better benefits for employees. Instead, it was just cash out the door.
Exactly. That extraction acts as a severe drag on the company's internal flywheel. But it's not just the publicly traded giants. We also have to talk about the other 95% of all U.S. businesses.
Okay, those are what the sources call pass-through companies. Can you just quickly clarify what that means for the listener?
Sure. Pass-throughs are usually S-Corp, LLCs, partnerships. Unlike big C corporations, they don't pay corporate income tax. Their income is passed through directly to the owners, who then pay individual income tax on it.
So most businesses.
The vast majority. And recent research shows that of all the increased concentration of wealth we've seen, 41% of it took the form of profits flowing directly to the owners of these pass-through businesses.
So this concentration of wealth is a structural problem that's just engineered into the financial design of almost every kind of business in America.
That's right, whether it's a giant on the Fortune 500 list or a mid-sized partnership.
And this explains why co-ops are more sustainable once they're running. They're designed to maximize reinvestment and benefit for their stakeholders, not just for outside returns.
Which brings us right to the challenge we have to solve, getting them off the ground in the first place. That startup hurdle is the bottleneck.
Yeah, right now, co-ops are, less than 0.2% of the 26 million businesses in the U.S.? And since building a platform to compete with Uber is so expensive, financing is everything.
And traditional banks are just inherently cautious about risky startups, full stop. But more critically, venture capital firms, the usual engine of tech growth, they have zero appetite for co-ops.
Why is that?
By design, a co-op caps the return for outside investors to protect the benefit for its members. VCs aren't interested if they can't get a 10x return or take a controlling stake in the company.
Okay, so if the established financial system is basically hostile to the co-op model, new funding sources are essential. And it looks like we're seeing 3 new opportunities emerge.
We are. The first is the rise of impact investing. There's a growing awareness among philanthropic foundations of the power of something called program-related investments, or PRIs.
That's an important term, PRI, program-related investment. Can you explain how a foundation making an investment is different from them just giving out a grant?
It's a huge distinction. A grant is money you give away with no expectation of getting it back. A PRI, on the other hand, is capital often a loan or maybe an equity stake that a foundation uses to further its mission, but which it expects to get back, maybe with a small below-market return.
Okay, so they're deploying capital to do good, but they get to reuse that capital later.
Precisely. And cooperatives are really attractive to these investors because their focus on stakeholder benefit and local economies aligns perfectly with social justice criteria.
So we're seeing new financial structures emerge to support this.
Yes, like the concept of the Integrated Impact Finance Vehicle, which groups like RSF Social Finance are championing.
No, wait, isn't mixing philanthropy, grants and goodwill with commercial loans and equity stakes, isn't that inherently complicated? How does that chain of support actually work?
It's a sharp question, and the answer is coordination. The Integrated Impact Finance Vehicle creates a chain of support to de-risk the investment. It might start with pure philanthropic grants to cover the absolute riskiest, earliest R&D phase. That success then unlocks lower-risk loans from specialized institutions. And then, finally, it can transition to an impact investment equity stake, which accepts a lower return than a VC would, but it ensures the mission is preserved.
So it's like a financial ecosystem built specifically for patient, mission-driven money. That makes a lot of sense. What's opportunity number two?
Much simpler. Crowdfunding. Its popularity has just exploded, turbocharged by social media. It lets these smaller member-focused groups just bypass the traditional gatekeepers and appeal directly to their future users.
And the third one is the most disruptive and definitely the one that comes with the most risks and media baggage. Decentralized technology. Cryptocurrency.
Yeah, and we have to acknowledge that the landscape of blockchain, ICOs, it's messy. It's often swarming with scams. However, the underlying technology for decentralized computing platforms like Ethereum specifically, it provides a way to build entirely new types of organizations that inherently democratize ownership from day one.
So the tech itself lets you bake the ownership structure right into the code of the platform. The rules for how profits are shared, who gets a vote, it's all written into a smart contract that can't be changed by some central authority.
Exactly. The code is the legal structure, which makes that kind of extraction we talked about structurally impossible by design. We're seeing projects like the Holochain project, which focuses on apps where every user is their own host, and a startup called Colony, which aims to use this tech to create decentralized autonomous organizations, DAOs, where ownership and governance are spread out among all the contributors.
So if the traditional corporate spigot is a flaw in the business's design, these decentralized platforms are trying to get rid of the faucet entirely by just distributing the whole reservoir.
It fundamentally changes the relationship between the worker and the tool. You own the tool you're using, or at least a piece of it, which eliminates that middle layer designed for extraction.
So if we bring this all back to the core argument, the real genius of the platform cooperative model is that it provides a necessary structural adjustment. It alters the wealth disparity equation by broadening ownership of the very tech engines that are causing all this disruption.
Think back to our hypothetical Airbnb alternative. It might use sophisticated AI, it might need very few full-time employees, but the critical shift is that the ownership, and therefore the profits, would go directly to the people listing their properties and maybe even the renters. It mirrors that same customer-owner model that REI has used so successfully.
You decouple the massive productivity gains of AI from the concentration of wealth. The machine gets more efficient, and those efficiency gains get shared broadly among the stakeholders, not narrowly among a few outside investors.
That is the ultimate goal. What we're witnessing right now is essentially an economic and social race. It's the explosion of AI and automation on one side, pitted against humanity's ability to rapidly expand ownership of these massive technological engines on the other.
And growing platform co-ops from the tiny sector they are today into a thriving, viable alternative is presented as a crucial step. A step toward ensuring that a vibrant economic future is also a fundamentally fair economic future for everyone.
It's a matter of choosing the right structure. If the structure is designed for extraction, the outcome will always be more inequality. If the structure is designed for reinvestment and stakeholder benefit, the outcome is a more resilient and equitable economic future.
And we established that co-ops are good at sustaining themselves once they're up and running, as well as or even better than standard businesses. The main hurdle is financing those initial high-tech development costs to get the flywheel spinning. So given the rise of these sophisticated funding models like PRIs and these new decentralized tools built on platforms like Ethereum, what role could you play, the learner listening to this deep dive in funding, or maybe even starting a platform cooperative in your own field of work? That's the challenge we'll leave you with today.